Well, fellas, Lightfall is here, and with it, a new legendary campaign. So guys, I want to give you my guide on how to get through this campaign. Some people say it's really hard. I actually don't think it's as hard as the Witch Queen legendary campaign. Granted, I played as a team of 2 this year instead of 3, and the game is weighted based on how many people are on your fire team. With that being said though, for solo players, the legendary campaign for Lightfall is probably a lot harder. Bungie actually ended up increasing the difficulty for solo play, as they stated that last year with Witch Queen, the legendary campaign was too easy for solo players. But whether you're solo or stacked, a new light player, or conquer, these tips will get you through the legendary campaign. Now, before we start talking shop, let's talk rewards, as I do think the legendary campaign is very much worth your time. Every major encounter grants a bonus chest with additional loot drops compared to the normal difficulty run. This actually means you're gonna have more gear to upgrade with and level with, because there are some major level jumps with each one of these encounters. And you'll find yourself even on the normal version, due to gear drops, you may be very much underleveled. But upon completing the legendary campaign, you actually get a new piece of exotic armor depending on the class you're playing on, a full 8-piece gear bundle set of 1770 gear, which is above the 1750 seasonal soft cap. You also get 8 upgrade modules to infuse this into your favorite armor, 300 strand meditations to unlock strand aspects and fragments with, and a slick new emblem called Sanctuary of Nephil. So yeah, it is harder, guys, but in my opinion, the rewards are definitely worth your time. With that being said though, this is difficult. It's a legendary campaign. It's hard. It's not quite Grandmaster Nightfalls or even Master Raids or anything like that, but you're gonna run into some serious challenges along the way. So let's break some of that down. First, you've got to select the legendary difficulty setting. After launching the game and watching the opening cutscene, you actually will get a big screen which will ask you to pick the difficulty. Now, if you need to switch out your gear, buy the new fragments, or even get a fire team together, you can back right out of the screen, and when you go to launch the first mission on Neptune, you'll get the prompt again. So don't worry, guys. You can go get your build settle, pick up the new fragments for other 3.0 subclasses. You can also toggle the difficulty at every mission start, so switch up as you need. Now, legendary difficulty missions all have the same modifiers. The legendary modifier means that heavily shielded and highly aggressive combatants appear in greater numbers. You also have radar disabled, galvanized, where combatants have more health. It also makes them more difficult to stun. Now, for context, unstoppable weapons and abilities can still stun enemies to remove their damage resistance. Multiplicity, which states it scales combat difficulty and revive limitations with larger fire teams. There's actually the difficulty scaling that makes sure that the mission challenge is roughly the same whether you're playing solo or with a fire team. And lastly, we have metal. This actually locks the activity at a fixed difficulty. Each mission has a recommended power level that requires you to level up your guardian by equipping or infusing higher power gear, but your strength against enemies is still going to be capped. That means even if you hit that cap, you cannot over level for that activity. That's as good as it's gonna get. So what does this all mean? Well, quite frankly, guys, it means the enemies are tough. From red bars to bosses, every single enemy is pretty tanky and continues to get tankier as level progression bumps up with every mission. So you really do have to play smart. If you don't want to waste time, pay attention to darkness zones. And if you're solo, dying will send you back to the last checkpoint. And if you're in a fire team, you each only got 1 revive token per encounter and 40 seconds total to revive a dead teammate. Luckily, clearing a darkness encounter resets all of this, but it does mean you can't just yeet your fragile body at those tough enemies. So play smarter, fellas. Now let's break down enemies. We've got some beefy new bad guys in this campaign, starting with the Shadow Legion. These are basically the same Cabal baddies that we've been fighting since the Red War, but they've got new outfits and a couple of new tricks up their sleeves. Now, some of the Shadow Legion actually carry darkness tech packs. You can spot them pretty easily. 1, it's actually this big block that's on their backs, and 2, they've got yellow shields, that darkness yellow that we first saw in the Vow of the Disciple. Now, if you kill one of these Cabal, the tech pack actually drops on the ground and creates a shield for enemies, similar to like Scorn Void Totems. It doesn't take much damage to break them, but make sure you clear them out. They actually give overshields to Cabal. Now, Shadow Legion Cabal also deploy suppression devices that can disable vehicles and supers for players. So dealing with them requires access to Strand, which you're going to get throughout the campaign, but not completely until after the campaign. But just be aware of them and don't rush in thinking you can just drop a bubble or well when you can't. Other than that, look out for the esteemed Shadow Legion Cabal enemies. These are the orange and yellow health bar enemies, and they require a lot of focus and caution to take down. If you see one, don't expect to punch it to death, guys. Kill it with Galahorn. I was actually rocking things like Izanagi throughout my run. Sleeper's doing pretty good. And speaking of those precision weapons, let's talk about the new enemy type that Bungie's been bragging about for months, and that is Tormentors. They're the new threats, and I actually want to talk about how to deal with Tormentors, because there is a mission where you have to fight 2 of them at the same time, and it is a hellacious mission. Now, Tormentors move pretty quickly. They're aggressive. You'll fight them in a lot of different size arenas, but they pretty much always have the ability to close the gap. Now they have a heavy hitting melee attack as well as these range void attacks. They can also slam the ground, which will deal void damage and suppress you. Yes, they can literally suppress you out of your super. It happened to me. It was extremely aggravating. And it can take away your things like your jump as well as your other abilities. Now their deadliest attack though is actually called the Dark Harvest. This is their grab ability. It totally immobilizes a guardian and it charges with void energy for several seconds, draining health, usually killing them. Now I got hit with the Dark Harvest. I don't know if there is a breakout feature. I didn't see a button. I was literally mashing everything and somehow I survived. Crazy enough, in the entire campaign, I only got hit with Dark Harvest once. Now there's some surefire ways to actually take out Tormentors. Let's start with its shoulders. These are actually glowing crit points. You want to shoot both of them enough and they'll break, revealing a single crit spot on the chest. Now weapons that I found that did a very good job of dealing with these crit spots, one of them being Izanagi, which by the way just got a buff with the kinetic buff. The other one being Sleeper. I know linear fusion rifles just got a nerf, but Sleeper still does the same amount of damage, or it's supposed to. Regardless though, it was doing pretty hefty damage here to Tormentors. And I do advise using heavy weapons that can actually deal crit damage, or a crit based weapon. We were using things like rockets and 1000 voices, and I just felt like it wasn't doing enough. Now keep in mind, once you actually break the first 2 crit spots on the shoulders, the Tormentor actually begins to move faster and becomes more aggressive. Now all of their attacks are clearly telegraphed. Before doing a suppressing slam, they'll hover in the sky. The slam has range, but if you move sideways, you can usually steer clear of this attack. You can also tell when they're about to use Dark Harvest when their eyes glow red. They start moving towards the player. Now whoever the target is, your screen will actually glow red. So run away as fast as you can to avoid this. Now if you do happen to get caught in the grab and you have a fire team nearby, there is some good news. The Tormentor sits perfectly still while they're trying to kill you. So they can actually blast its crit spot with ease. Now they may not be able to free you every time, but it's at least predictable behavior that can be exploited. In some ways, you may want to sacrifice a teammate. No, not really. Fading light is a thing. Don't do it. Now Tormentors are also easily controlled with elemental effects. So things like Void Suppress, Stasis Freeze, Strand Suspend, which is really good. We're going to talk about builds here in just a bit, but if you got access to those abilities, use them. Now Orange Bar Tormentors can be finished, but this won't work against Yellow Bar Boss Tormentors. Now let's talk builds. The best way to manage pretty much all of these challenging enemies is with the right build. Now there are a ton of new mods, a huge balance patch, but no surges, threats, or overcharges active on these missions. But for any build, you've got to start with the subclass. And this is where we need to rip the band-aid off. You are not going to unlock Strand subclass until after you complete the campaign. This was actually messing me up a lot because I assumed we were going to unlock Strand and I could actually build Strand out for the campaign. And so everything I was using exotic-wise was in anticipation of using a Strand subclass. Now there are many moments in the campaign where you are using Strand, but again, you're just using the power. You don't actually have the subclass and the aspects and the fragments. You don't unlock those until after the campaign. And a lot of the fragments are actually locked until after the raid. So the builds you really do want to have available are your regular builds, your Arc, Solar, Void, and Stasis builds. You're going to be switching between your chosen build and the periodic moments where you get Strand Empowerments throughout the campaign. I will say though, running a neutral game exotic will give you more flexibility between the two though. Now considering how tough the enemies are here, guys, I think the builds should definitely prioritize survival. At the same time though, we do have a few that can go in between both of these. For Titans, I was actually running Sentinel. Void Overshields from things like Bastion, Ward of Dawn was good. There was a few moments I did throw on Lord of Thunder, but instead of doing my normal Storm Grenade build, I was actually rocking Pulse Nades. Pulse Nades got a 20% buff, and even though Heart of Inmost Light got a nerf, combination of Ionic Traces, Thruster, and a couple mods like Grenade Kickstart, Utility Kickstart, these things really help with those Heart of Inmost Light builds, and it's still pretty good. Granted, even though my Pulse Grenades were pretty good, Void Overshields from Bastion and Ward of Dawn is super clutch when it comes to keeping your team alive. For Warlocks, honestly, if you really want the easiest way to get through this Nightfall, play a Warlock, and I mean rock Star Class. We've talked about this build in the past, but Star Class is a phenomenal build. A big complaint people have had with Star Class was that how can you stay alive when you're using Empowering Rifts and not Healing Rifts, considering that's what's synergizing with Starfire Protocol and Empowered Damage, and of course Fusion Nates. Guys, go and pick up the new fragment called Ember of Resolve from Ikora. It says Solar Grenade Final Blows cure you. There you go, guys. That's how you can stay alive. Matter of fact, I will leave a dim link down below. This was actually Les's build that he used on his Warlock, and it was doing some work. Now, if you don't want to go that route, a more traditional Well of Radiance build is always good. You can even rock things like Void Walker with Devour, alongside things like the Stag. And for my Hunters, Night Stalker is still an all-around winner. You got invisibility up a lot of times, which is a huge benefit. Both Shadow Shot supers can lock down crowded rooms. Wormhusk is also a great exotic for survivability. But regardless of whatever subclass you do run, choose whichever one you want to play, and of course, whichever one you want to get the exotic for. Now, even though most enemies are big and tough, make sure you have ad clearing effects equipped. Arc, jolts, solar ignitions, void volatile. This can tear through small groups of enemies, allowing you to focus on the bigger threats. Now, before moving on, I do want to clarify Strand Empowerments. Even though you won't get the subclass, the Lightfall campaign has a series of predetermined encounters in which you get to use Strand abilities, sometimes with limits and sometimes not. Now, each time the game will actually give you a new Strand ability. It'll give you a tutorial on the screen. Keep in mind, whatever builds you do have on, say for instance Starfire Protocol, that won't necessarily help you when using Strand, which is why I said that maybe you want to go with a more neutral game exotic. Now, while you may have access to Strand abilities while empowered, you cannot customize them. This means Titans, you're stuck with Rally Barricade. Warlocks, you can't try out Threadling Grenades. And again, we're not actually allowed to customize anything until after the Lightfall campaign. So it is a bit restrictive here. Lastly, empowerment is always temporary. You can actually get empowerment, die, and I've been revived and had my previous subclass pop up. It's kind of wild. So guys, that pretty much covers subclasses. As far as weapons go, overall kinetic weapons are performing much better in the sandbox. Witherhoard is always a great choice. Izanagi's Burden was actually doing great damage against Tormentors. Granted, as a solo player, that's going to be kind of tough to land, because a Tormentor is going to be chasing you down. At least if you have a teammate, they can kind of grab aggro. But other kinetics that are doing really well, Outbreak Perfected, Revision 0, both of those are performing very nicely. You can even rock things like Arbalest, so lots of great kinetic options. Keep in mind though, Witherhoard is a kinetic special, and it got to dip into that 1.15 multiplier. And the beautiful thing about Witherhoard is its ability to not only do great single target damage, but also just lock down ads that are rushing you. Now, even though linear fusion rifles have been nerfed, they still do perform well. So feel free to still rock a legendary linear. I wasn't really that impressed with heavy grenade launchers, despite their buff. Granted, I was mainly trying to mess with the new Waveframe grenade launcher, but I'm still trying to get that one down. Just make sure whatever you're rocking, guys, you're taking advantage of the new scavenger mods, as well as the updated ammo finder mods. Scavenger mods especially are tied to the elements. Now, element and weapon perks. Since you'll be switching subclasses, it is worth keeping weapons around with perks like Chill Clip, Bolt Shot, and Incandescence, so you always have the ability to apply Freeze, Jolt, or Ignition to clear ads and stun larger enemies. Again, there aren't any champions here, but between Tormentors and ad clearing, having weapons that can do this type of damage really does help. Look no further than Riptide. Now, to round out some of our build recommendations, again, there is a ton of new mods and mods that just changed from its previous versions. We also have a new build screen and loadout system. Again, this is build crafting 4.0. You got things like ammo finders and scouts. Now, granted, ammo finders aren't exactly new. You slot them into your helmet, and it increases the chance of finding special heavy ammo for your equipped weapons. But these scout mods actually take this to the next level. When one of your ammo finder perks creates a brick of ammo for you, it also creates a brick for your allies. And it's extremely cheap, guys. This is actually a game changer. Now, anybody can generate heavy ammo for the whole fire team without using things like Aeon Colts or Lucid Finisher, etc. And both mods, again, only cost us 4 energy. Now, Emergency Reinforcement. This is actually an armor charge mod. This reduces incoming damage after a shield break. Now, as a reminder here, guys, armor charge replaced the old charge with light and elemental well system, giving armor charge each time you pick up an orb of power. And this mod consumes up to 3 armor charge stacks, giving longer damage reduction with more stacks consumed. Again, really good for getting out of a pinch. You also have Font of Endurance. This generates a bonus to resilience while you have stacks of armor charge. Keep in mind though, it does cause stacks to decay once every 10 seconds. Now, you can extend this with the updated time dilation mod to make that resilience last even longer. And we have weapon surge mods. Now, this is not to be confused with the new surge modifier on Vanguard activities. These are leg mods that grant bonus damage to a weapon type while you have stacks of armor charge. So like Font of Endurance, these stacks decay over time, but there are surge mods for kinetic, arc, solar, void, stasis, and strand weapons. Now, if you're coming up short on damage, you can actually coordinate your weapons to match some of the weapon surge mods, which will help you out even if you're under leveled. Now, you also have charged up and stacks on stacks. Since armor charge is so prevalent now, you can use these mods to boost your maximum armor charge stack from 3 all the way up to 6, which can make a big difference here, guys. Essentially picking up your charge decay time from 30 seconds to a full minute. Now, finally, we have Proximity Ward. This class item mod grants an overshield while performing your finisher at no cost. On top of that, no super energy is consumed, no armor charge, literally just a free overshield for doing a finisher. And no lie, considering the health of so many of these enemies in this campaign, finishers actually save you a lot of ammo. You can even combine things like proximity ward, echo of obscurity, which allows you to get an overshield and go invisible on finishers. Now let's jump into the tips portion of this guide. And I want to first dive into Fireteam quest progression. The Lightfall quest has 21 steps. And unlike previous expansions, any member of the Fireteam can advance smaller steps in the quest by talking to vendors or characters with dialogue. This is actually a great quality of life change that prevents players in a Fireteam from getting stuck at different points in a quest. Just be aware of it so that somebody doesn't think they missed something. Now, leveling up. This is a part that's actually going to put you in a pinch. There are going to be times in this quest where you are under leveled, and significantly so, which is why I do advise do a side quest. In particular, after the second story mission, you'll receive the quest from 0. In the descriptions, recommend you do this quest to stay appropriately leveled for the story. And I know that legendary missions do help you level up faster than the normal difficulty, but you can still find yourself below that recommended power threshold for a mission. So if you want to go do a couple side story quests, you can even jump into some of the seasonal content. We have a seasonal guide as well. Get a couple pieces of gear, level up a little bit more, and then tackle that mission again. And if you're stuck under level for a tough fight, you can just step out of the campaign. So again, guys, feel free to jump into other content and then tackle that mission again. Now, checkpoints. For the first time in a Bungie game since Halo, you can see notifications on the lower left hand of your screen that says checkpoint reached. Obviously, if your team wipes, you'll be returned here, but you can also quit a story mission and return to it later at your most recent checkpoint, much like a dungeon or a raid with many more checkpoints per mission. So again, if you need to step out and level up or even take a breather, you can. I know some of these missions can be long. Now, interludes. The story of Destiny has always been a little complicated. So when you see a marker on the Amuna map marked interlude in the Hall of Heroes, go check it out, guys. Now, these don't really impact gameplay, but they fill out the story of Lightfall and actually make this journey feel much more impactful. Now, I had some people come in and actually complain about the final mission. Some of you even said it was way too difficult and you just couldn't get past it. And spoilers, you're actually taking on Callus in the final mission. Funny enough, Les actually focused completely on Callus doing damage, and I kind of split my time between doing damage and keeping ads off of our back. Even things like Tormentors, I would use my Riptide on and just freeze them and then proceed to just look at Callus and do damage to Callus. Now, there is a point in this mission where you get moved to the center of the room, and yes, it is extremely chaotic. Again, I don't know what it's like for solo players, but I was very thankful that I had Les with me. I think that this campaign, it is much more beneficial having a fire team with you. So if you are looking for a fire team to do this campaign with, guys, come by our Discord. It's very active. Tons of people are playing Destiny on it, constantly teaming up. We've got LFGs, cross plays in Destiny, so you can literally play with whoever you want to play with. Hell, you don't even have to use a mic. But I will say, guys, having someone on your fire team really does help in this campaign. So guys, there you go. That is our guide for the Lightfall Legendary campaign. Let me know in the comments below if we missed anything. And again, if you missed our seasonal guide, feel free to check that one out. We'll have a link to that in the description as well. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.